Hey! 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 This is library.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 7 of the Tell Me About That Book podcast. Short conversations about some of the best books on personal growth, mindset, fitness, and business topics with some of the leaders in the fitness industry. Today we're talking about extreme ownership. Now you can go to tellmeaboutthatbook.com. You can get a link for the readitfor.me book summary of today's book, Extreme Ownership. It's free. You just got to sign up and you'll get the summary and the little video and the audio. Now, any money made with sponsorships or affiliate links for the podcast will go directly to Inner City Weightlifting, and you can find out more about them at tellmeaboutthatbook.com. All right, for today's show, I have on Kevin Carr, and Kevin is one of the super trainers at Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning. He's also the co-owner of Movement as Medicine. He's a licensed massage therapist. Lots more letters behind his name: FMS, SFMA, NKT. All that stuff. He's also the co-owner of the Certified Functional Strength Coach, which he's been just traveling. If you're friends with him on social media, see he's all over the place. He's becoming one of the most sought after speakers in the business. Kevin, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here and happy to be back home for a little bit.
All right, nice. I was telling you before, I wanted to pick the, partner with Mike Boyle on I partnered on the wrong business with him. I have the internet thing, man. I should have picked that one. Jeez. It's very cool. I know it's got to be tough though, but you guys are running around. But you guys are making the most of it, staying in these places and doing some hikes and ice cream.
Got to see everything. You got to see the world when you can, So trying to make the most of it for sure.
Absolutely. Well, today's book is Extreme Ownership. I absolutely love this book. I listened to it. Did you listen to it or read it?
I read it and then listened to it because people told me that it was a really good audio. My natural instinct is to buy hard copy always, and then I went back and did it, and it was definitely worth it. Yeah.
Oh my God, I love to have a book in my hand, but this was the greatest read. I mean, these guys, the voice, it was like, yeah, we were in Ramadi, and and I'm like, I was like jacked up just listening to these guys.
Yeah, like Jocko's voice is like. It's a good military voice, Yep. He tells the story well.
I mean, what's funny is I'd be walking home, and I live on the 25th floor, and I try to take the steps every day. And so I'd be walking home. Sometimes I'm tired, but I'm listening to the book on the way home, and I'm like, I get to my building, and sometimes I'll be like, maybe I'll walk in a little while, I'll go upstairs first. Then I'm listening to Jocko, and he wasn't even telling me to walk up the stairs, but I was like, if this guy's telling me a story about Ramadi or something, and here I am going up my nice 25th floor building, I'm like, you can walk up the stairs. Let's go. So he inspired me without even doing anything. Kev, tell me, give us a summary of Extreme Ownership.
So what they essentially do, for you who haven't read the book, is he takes these lessons in leadership and he makes the analogy between their experiences in war, which makes the book extremely interesting because he gives these real life examples of when they use it when the stakes are obviously extremely high, like your life. And he tells these stories about his struggles with leadership or people within his platoon and his company, and then relates them back to real life business examples. So he'll actually, instead of just saying like, oh, you could use this in business, he'll take it and actually create a real hypothetical.
Well, they're consultants, right? That's their business consultants. So they talk about, I love that's another thing. You're right. The format was like, they talk about their situation in Ramadi, then they talk about the principal, and then they talk about a situation that they consulted on in business.
Yeah, because typically, if you want to find a good way to fall asleep, a business book sometimes can be a good sleep aid. But this was one of the ones, like you said, especially if you listen to the audio, that's not one you're going to fall asleep listening to, and they really keep you interested. And they have the different principles you go through that he kind of operates under, which I think can be some good bullet points for leaders to follow. Obviously in any business. So. I think if you break them down, there's I think maybe six or seven of them where they talk about there's no bad teams, there's only bad leaders, and you have to believe in your mission, and you have to check your ego, and they have these quick bullet points that I think they're really good. You can almost make a list, at your desk, that you can follow to kind of set as reminders. At least that's what I've done.
Yeah. And yeah, like the first one is extreme ownership. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
almost, and I talk to somebody about this a lot. I tell them, listen, it's a big therapy thing. And when you go to therapy, they'll say, well, what's your role in this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though you're like, well, it's not my fault. I'm like, no, but what's your role in it? Like we always have a role in whatever happens, and that's what they were talking about was just you got to own it. Like extreme, it's extreme. No matter what happens, it was you. You got to take ownership, and as a leader, you're going to get that respect too from your team. Like when you're kind of taking the bullet, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like as someone who is younger, and then starting to have some people underneath you who, especially, are like not that much younger than you, right? Like a lot of the people who work at our gym are around the same, like 23 to 28, 29-year-old window. So everyone's kind of in the same boat. But then, sometimes if something goes wrong, everyone's first thing is to default to like, oh, well, I told them to do it this way. Well, you didn't tell them well enough, or you didn't execute enough of an example. And whenever I see something go wrong in any business or like in my life, I try to think, okay, well, I obviously didn't explain myself clear enough, or I didn't do a good enough job communicating, and always defaulting back to owning it. Because the thing that I know that he says in there is like, if you own every problem, you give yourself the power to fix it. If you don't own it, then you essentially leave yourself helpless, right? And you finger point, and then that breaks down a team. Whereas if you own it, you give yourself the power to resolve the problem. And I think for most people, that kind of matures them as a leader a lot. If you can always remind yourself just of that one point, I think if you take away anything from that book.
No, you're right. And a lot of them tie in together. Like you said, extreme ownership is principle one. Principle two would be there are no bad teams, only bad leaders. But if you're already, if you're practicing extreme ownership, you're probably going to be a better leader, right? So, and then you realize, okay, yeah, it is my fault. So they're very similar. And then understand, you have to believe if you want to win. That was principle number 3. And I think that does tie into this whole education thing and having people really buy into, like a movement is medicine. You also have to they have to buy into your philosophy.
Absolutely. And so today we had a MBSC staff meeting, and we've been talking about programming because we're getting ready for the summer program. So we got to, kind of put our heads together, the senior coaches and Mike, and say, okay, this is our plan for all the different types of groups in the summer. And we just kind of talked about how, listen, we need everyone to be on the same page. So right now, like if there's something that you think should be different, this is your time to speak up and us to put our heads together and figure out what's the best product for the floor. Because if not, if everyone doesn't believe in this, what we're doing, or people think, oh, well, we should program it this way, and then we get on the floor and people are, kind of doing their own thing. And we don't really ever have that problem, but it's just to make sure we go over it. That way everything's flowing and everybody has the same belief. And then because of that, the athletes see that. I think if you have coaches that don't necessarily believe in your philosophy out on the floor, the athletes are pretty sharp. Like they pick up on that, and then they might not believe in it. So that's something we talked about today, actually, just completely unrelated. But I think, especially in our field, because I think you have a lot of people who want to be artists, right? If you're a strength and conditioning coach or a therapist, like everyone's like, oh man, like it feels like an art to them, but you have to be able to take that art and put it into a system. And that's belief right there, I think.
Yeah, and funny because principle 4 is check your ego. So it kind of does go like you guys are checking your ego as leaders by saying, hey, you guys are on the floor. Help us out. Tell us what you think needs to be changed. Speak up right now, by the way. Now's the time to speak up. Don't do it on the floor because I don't want to be hearing, well, that's not the way Kevin does it. We want to be on the same page.
Yeah, and even just saying that today, we got good feedback from, some of our newer coaches, like Brooke, who gave feedback today. She's someone who was an intern just a couple of semesters ago, and she said, well, in my experience coaching the middle school groups that I have, setting it up, like the logistics in that order, make it a lot harder for me to coach and teach. Because if you're coaching some of the older high school or college or professional guys, it's not as much teaching as it is just adjusting the program, right? And it's sometimes like Mike even said, like, oh, I'm not necessarily accustomed to that because I might just have the pro guys. And then you go down, again, you said these all connect. The idea of like decentralized command or multi-directional leadership. Like she spoke up and said, hey, in my setting, that actually might make it harder for me because it makes it harder for me to teach to kids who have never done med balls or before or something along that line. So, that creates a really good open meeting. Like Ken and I walked out today of the staff meeting and said, wow, that was like a really good meeting about programming where there was a lot of input from all levels of staff members.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think one of Mike's favorite things, keep things simple, right? It's one of the principles in there. I loved it because Mike Boyle has always written an article in the past or talked about the curse of knowledge, right? Where we start talking about certain things and, by the time it gets to our clients, they don't care about that anyway, about those types of, whatever, anatomy or philosophy behind programming. Like they just want to, and to keep things simple was a great story in there when they were talking about the plan, when they had to present their plan and they were nervous and everybody's coming up with all these crazy ideas and presenting these really detailed, like, because they were worried about, like, it was all about the PowerPoint, right? Remember, like, it was like,
yeah.
I don't know, like how, if you had more slides, the better, the more, the better. But then they came in with like a really short presentation that was completely clear. It just goes to show you, man, that's the way to go.
Exactly. You just simple, especially like when your staff starts to grow from a management standpoint, like the telephone game we always talk about, like the more details you have, the more likely it's going to get screwed up. So, and I always go back to Mike saying like creating a system makes the gym run very smoothly. And it's this very simple system. Like we say, you can look at the progression regression sheet and make a decision, right? And if we had a more complicated system there, I think we'd have more and more opportunities for error.
Absolutely. Now, just kind of finish up with the, they talk about best leaders practice extreme ownership, and it's so true. We just said it. It was like, if you follow the first one, right, of extreme ownership, if you take extreme ownership, it's like a virus. Your guys see that. Have you tried with some of the employees to talk to them about taking ownership as well? And I know obviously you're probably trying to set that example as well for yourself, but it's nice to kind of talk to them about they need to take some ownership as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we do a good job of, no matter the level of staff member, talking to them about like, listen, like this is everybody's gym, right? So like if you, and it's not an easy conversation to have. Like if I have a newer staff member say like, listen, if you see something that you don't agree with, or you feel like you have to lead up. Like the ownership is at all levels. And I think especially when you're younger, sometimes you're not comfortable leading laterally or leading vertically, right? You can only feel like comfortable leading people who might be newer below you. Yeah. But telling them like, listen, this is everybody's gym. These are everybody's clients, and we're going to be the best organization if people can lead in all directions. The number one part of that is showing that people who might be more senior have the humility to take feedback from someone else, right? So I'll tell staff members all the time, like, listen, if you have an opinion or you think, hey, you could do this better, say it. Like, I'm not going to get offended. And like Mike said, maybe the answer might still be like, oh, well, too bad. That's how we do things here, right? But it might also be like, oh, wow, that's a really good point that I didn't see. And it just opens anything that opens up communication. And I think Ken and Steve, they take ownership over their piece. And, Marco has been taking ownership. Like if I'm not in the clinic, like doing all the little things here and managing, and now talking to the newer like movement as medicine employees like Nicole and Scott, getting them to see, okay, this isn't just your place of business. This isn't just like where you go to work. This is like a business that you're a big part of. So take ownership of all the little things too. And then everything kind of starts to snowball. And I think the biggest thing is leading, for example, like, you see Mike taking out the trash to the dumpster, right? I think sometimes more than even saying it, like doing it, like if you see Mike going out the dumpster, he was standing in the dumpster pushing down cardboard boxes a few weeks ago. And like, I think that without even saying anything shows taking ownership. And then you feel like, okay, there's no job that's too small for me or that I can't handle no matter where you are on the org chart. you know?
Yeah, it's a good point. It's funny. I remember being in the bar business, and on crowded nights, I would go around and grab. I was the manager. I opened the bar. I ran the bar. But I
Hmm.
would go around and grab glasses. Like and pick them up off the floor. In the clubby part of the bar, and I always tried to make sure that the busboys saw me doing that, so they knew,
Yeah,
like, I'm here too, man. I'm doing it. I'm with you. I'm on your team. So I
exactly.
think it's a really important thing. Good points. Great stuff. So, Kev, thanks for coming on and talking about extreme ownership. One of my favorite. It's another one, like you said. I think I'll probably listen to this again just because I loved listening to it. So, but
Hmm.
thanks for coming on and doing this.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to talk about it. It's a good reminder for me, just reviewing the book with you. So,
All right. Well, that's going to do it for episode 7 of Tell Me About That Book. Remember, go to tellmeaboutthatbook.com to get the link for the Read It For.me book summary of today's book, Extreme Ownership. Thanks to Kevin Carr for coming on and sharing his thoughts and for discussing extreme ownership. Any money made with sponsorships of this podcast will go directly to inner city weightlifting. You can find out more at tellmeaboutthatbook.com. My name's Anthony Rena. Thanks again, and I'll speak to you next time.